but for me, some of the simplest words are sometimes the hardest to say. These are the phrases that when we go to say them, it's like we have cotton balls in our mouths. Our tongues get tied, our throat gets dry, and it becomes almost impossible to speak. For some, it's words like, I'm sorry, or please forgive me. For others, and it might be sexist to say this, but I think mostly men, it's the words, I love you. And it's not that these words are phonetically challenging, and it's not that there's no love to express, no forgiveness to ask for, but it's because there's discomfort in saying those powerful words, simply because they are such powerful words. Simple words can often carry profound meaning, profound feelings. And because they do, we struggle to say them. Words like, I love you, I'm sorry, forgive me, I need your help, goodbye. In our gospel today, Jesus comes to a turning point in his 3 years of public ministry. Behind him, things of the past, are the great crowds of Galilee who hung on his every word. And before him is the cross, the passion. Remember last week when I said that because Mark's gospel is so short, scholars say that we need to pay attention to every detail. Today's gospel is another good example of that. This great exchange between Jesus and Peter takes place around the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi was kind of this new concept in cities. It was built by one of King Herod's sons, and it was a beautiful city built at an elevation, but just at the foot of Mount Hermon. Here in the U.S., you might think of Vail, Colorado, or Asheville, North Carolina. Here in southern Indiana, you can think of St. Joe Hill, built at the foothills of the Knobs. And being this new city, built by a son to honor his father, it was also a lavish city. People wanted to visit it simply because it was different than their own hometown. It had larger, ornate buildings. It had paved or cobblestone roads. It had brothels and baths. It was kind of a modern-day Sin City. It is here, along the way to Caesarea Philippi, that Mark tells us Jesus asked the 12, who do people say that I am? I think he's a little bit curious about what people think of him. And the apostles answer honestly with what they've heard. Some say you're John the Baptist, risen from the dead. Others think you're Elijah or one of the other prophets. But things begin to unravel when he asks them directly, but you, who do you say that I am? I can imagine at that time, their tongues get tied, their mouth gets dry. I imagine an awkward silence as the 12 look around to one another to see if anyone's going to venture an answer. Not really sure themselves how to answer the question. All except Peter, who says, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah. One mouth, 2 lips, 4 words, 6 syllables. You are the Messiah. And how did Jesus respond? Basically, he said, good. Now that you got it, don't tell anyone. You see, Jesus knew what being the Messiah meant. He knew what it meant for him, and he knew what it meant for anyone who was going to choose to follow him. The 12 really didn't know the power of that one mouth, 2 lips, 4 words, and 6 syllables. But Jesus knew the power of those words. And he tells them so. Jesus tells the disciples that he's going to go to Jerusalem, and once there, he will endure great suffering. He'll be rejected by the religious leaders of his day. He will be killed, and after 3 days, rise again. For Jesus knew that to be the Messiah would be to give his life in suffering love for the world. Peter's confession of faith had troubling implications for Jesus and for the 12. But I would maintain for us to say today that Jesus is the Messiah, to say that you're a Christian today comes with a cost as well. About 20 years after this exchange between Jesus and Peter, write a brief letter to the Christians living in the city of Jerusalem. We heard parts of that letter today. James was a leader of the church in Jerusalem. And not long after he wrote that letter, he himself would give his life for Christ. The letter of James reminds the Christ followers in Jerusalem that to be a Christ follower, to be a Christ one, to be a Christian requires us not only to look at how we speak, but more importantly, how we live. And so James asks the question, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works? Apparently, some in the Jerusalem church had started showing up for worship without also being willing to show up for service. James began this part of this letter chiding those who gave deference to the rich over the poor. And what he is saying in all this is that you who are Christians must live Christian life, because if you are a Christian and living an unchristian life, you are committing hypocrisy. And James emphasizes it again when he says, so also faith of itself, if it does not have works, is dead. So what is the message for us today? Today's lesson reminds us that words are powerful. When Peter made that great confession of faith, you are the Messiah, he put his life on a path that would discover the deepest meaning of faith. Yes, he would fail Jesus again when he denies him 3 times. But taking a long look at Peter's life over the years, that one confession of faith changed his life forever. Words. Living words, loving words, encouraging words. They change us and others when we speak them. To ask forgiveness from someone you have deeply hurt begins a work of grace in 2 lives, yours and the person you're asking forgiveness from. To say, I love you, gives joy in the life of 2 hearts, not just one. Words invite us to live out the faith we speak. And not just with those we know and love, but sometimes with those we've never met. When someone says something like, I will serve in the soup kitchen, or I'll tutor a child who needs a good role model, or I'll join the St. Vincent de Paul team, or I will, and you can fill in the blank. When you say something like that, and then go and do it, you begin to make a connection between your words and your faith. When you do that, when you put your life, your time, your influence, dare I say, your faith into action, then you become examples of what it means to be a Christ one, a Christ follower, a Christian. My friend, words are powerful. But as St. James reminds us, sometimes they are only words, unless we also put our words